Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode in our long running series of 52 must see movies and why they matter. I am back here once again with my friend Stephen Billings. Stephen, how are you?
All right, all right. Just got done watching this movie we're going to talk about today, and it was awesome. I can't wait to talk about it.
A nice Matthew McConaughey impression there. I noticed that. That was very good. It was his birthday yesterday, coincidentally. But we are not talking about Matthew McConaughey. We are here once again talking about another classic film, another older film, and all of the films we've been talking about have been from this book here that was put out by Turner Classic Movies, written by Jeremy Arnold, and with a foreword by the late great Robert Osborne, who unfortunately passed away. And we have been honoring him and Turner Classic Movies by doing an episodic series of videos based on all of these movies in this book here. And it's been a very interesting list, and we have done certainly a lot of videos up to this point. But today we are discussing a film called Adam's Rib, which came out in 1949, directed by George Cukor and starring one of the greatest on-screen romantic pairings probably in Hollywood history, probably movie history in general, and that is Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn. And this is an interesting film because I find it to be extremely contemporary, very quick, a quick, easy, fun watch, but also a deep dive into a lot of philosophical themes that are not only prevalent then, but prevalent now as well when it comes to the relationship between men and women. For those of you who do not know about this film, essentially it is about a married couple. They are both lawyers, and they are both kind of assigned to this case where Spencer Tracy's character is the prosecutor and Katharine Hepburn's character is the defendant. And this case centers around a woman who who found out her husband was cheating and decided that she was going to go shoot him. And it is kind of an attempted murder case. Initially, I had remembered it as being an actual murder case, but they didn't go quite that far. But it's very interesting how there's a very much a battle of wills and a battle of ideologies back and forth between the two characters. And I know this was a rewatch for me, but I know this was a first time watch for Steven. So, Steven, what were your first impressions of it?
So yeah, I mean, going into this movie, knowing the duo we had on screen, I knew I was in for something definitely with good acting, and did not expect how like not only was the dramatic parts really good, but the comedy in this film is fantastic. There was actually a couple scenes I audibly laughed out loud, like loud, thought, whether it was like something somebody said or some kind of slapstick comedy of some sort. There was a couple times where, one would bump into the other or knock a door into the other person or, and sometimes it would be kind of like risque remarks about some other person, whether like it be the neighbor who's hitting on Katharine Hepburn's character and is like writing songs for her, and like, we'll get into it deep, but yeah, I thought this movie was fantastic. I can't, I'm gonna buy this movie when they come out with a proper release for it. But
Yeah.
yeah.
For those of you who want to watch this, I mean, I rented it on Amazon for $3. I know there's a DVD you can buy. I have a feeling there's going to be a Blu-ray here in the United States at some point. I mean, Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy, someone will buy it. I mean, Steven and I will definitely buy it. But yeah, this is one of their many collaborations they had with one another. I believe they did 9 films together over a long period of time, pretty much up from 1942 all the way up till 1967. They had this great on-screen chemistry together, as well as an off-screen 26-year-long romance with one another, where there was kind of an affair that they were having behind the scenes, and it's all out now. I mean, it's been years and years since that happened. So we all know about it. If you're adept at Hollywood history and the romances and all that kind of stuff, you know about Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn. And I have to say, their on-screen chemistry is fantastic. And every film that I've seen together, they feel like a couple. like especially in this film, a married couple who are going back and forth with one another, kind of bickering at one another, trying to get the upper hand, not only in this case, but also when they're at home. And what is interesting I found about this film is it almost feels um, like a play. You know what I mean? It feels like a film that would work well on in a theater because it is only really set in a couple of places. The apartment and the courtroom are the two most dominant places that the film takes place in, and it's all dialogue. It's all like wonderful, really tight dialogue. The movie's only an hour and 40 minutes long, so there's not a lot of fat in this film. Every scene has some type of meaning and really develops the plot further, moves it along. And so I really enjoyed this film. And we also have two not lesser known actors and actors at the time, but they wouldn't be famous until the years later. One being Judy Holliday, who actually won an Oscar, I believe, about a couple of years after this. Coincidentally, Judy Holliday plays Doris Addinger, who is the forlorn wife of Warren Addinger, who is played by Tom Yule, who is probably, at least for me, most famously known for being in The 7-Year Itch, the movie with starring Marilyn Monroe. It's that famous movie where she has that scene above the sidewalk grate with the air blowing up her skirt. I mean, it's been used and parodied so many different times that everybody kind of knows it. But he is the main actor in that film. But here we have two powerhouses in Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy, and I really liked how well of a courtroom drama this was. I mean, drama, but with some lighter stuff. I thought the courtroom scenes were kind of my favorite parts of the movie because you could see how serious each of them were taking the situation and trying really to keep out the personal connection between each other.
Yeah, I mean, I felt that too. Yeah, I mean, at times, I think it started out, really serious at first, and then when they realized that they didn't want to fight at home either. They did lighten it up a little bit in the courtroom. Like they would have moments where they would bend down underneath their table and look at each other and like try to make nice faces at each other and try to lighten it up.
Yeah, when they were doing the picking the jury. Picking the jury, and I like how they didn't drag that sequence out. I like how they just showed like one jury member, and they just showed how each of them were going to tackle picking a jury, and kind of how each of them were going to tackle the case. Katharine Hepburn's character is going to be going for more of an agenda, more of a feminist agenda. That's heavily prevalent throughout the film. The first thing she asks that a potential juror is, "Oh, how do you feel about equal rights towards women? Are you against it or for it?" And the guy's like, "Oh, I am against it." And she's like, "Oh, dismiss this guy." You know what I mean? While Spencer Tracy's character is concentrating on the case. He's going to ask, do you know these two defendants? Have you ever served on a jury before? Kind of more standard. She is going to change things up a bit. It's going to be much different, and we see that throughout the case, where the questions they are asking are vastly different to the defendant and to the woman and all that stuff. Where Katharine Hepburn's trying to highlight the fact that this woman was in a bad situation, was in a very abusive relationship, and established that the guy really didn't care about her at all. She's asking him a series of questions like, "Oh, do you love your wife?" And the guy goes, "Oh, when? Before she shot me?" Like, yeah, before she shot you. And he's like, "No." And then she's like, "How long before?" And he's like, "Oh, 3 years." And I'm like, and I'm watching it, and I'm like, wow, there are marriages like this today that are loveless marriages. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was gonna say my favorite part about that scene, though, even though it's awful, is when he's like, "So why would you cheat on your wife?" "Yeah, because she got fat." I couldn't help it. It was hilarious because in a way, this movie, even though it has a lot of serious themes, it is a comedy. There's very much a lot of comical moments in this movie. It's almost like it's it's trying to go about exploring these themes, but in a fun way. Because sometimes when you make movies that have these like heavy themes, people sometimes think they're overbearing or they're hitting you over the head with this message. But when you filter it through a comical perspective, it makes it more accessible for more people. And I think that's one thing that I think modern movies could take a lesson from, is that sometimes they come out with these political movies or these racial movies or these any kind of movies like that, and they take it too seriously and they turn people off. And sometimes with movies like Get Out, like we had this year, where it took ideas and put it into a different genre and lightened it up a little bit, people can consume that a lot easier and can understand where you're coming from a lot easier. And I think that's what this movie does really well.
Yeah, it's much more easily digestible in that form. Not that it's taking away from the credibility or the eye or what it's trying to prove, because this film really doesn't. Despite some of these sequences, it's very interesting that this film does take place in 1949. We're talking post-World War II. We're talking decades upon decades ago, and it's touching upon female roles in societies and how marginalized they are. And that's something that is happening. It's a conversation people are still having today. And it's fascinating that a film from 49 is addressing it and how still it's a problem. And I thought it's very interesting how there's one sequence in the film where she brings in basically women who just to prove the fact that women are just as equal or perhaps more so in society in some form than men. And she brings in a woman who is very highly educated. It's a great funny scene, like you said, where she's listing off like what her job is and all the degrees she has, and then she's like, "Oh, would you want me to list the European ones as well?" And the judge goes, "Oh yeah, you might as well." And then she starts speaking in French. You know what I mean? It's the movie's trying to show that women in society have a much bigger role than what the defendant was in this case, or even what traditionally women are perceived to be. This idea of just being wives who cater towards their husband, and once their husband's needs are not met, the husband can treat them like terribly, like trash. You know what I mean? Which is basically what this case is about. And it also trying to figure out what is justifiable in society and what isn't. Was this woman justified in what she did towards her husband? You know what I mean? That's I think the case is trying to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, and also, like the reason, like I was telling Andrew about this movie kind of reminds me of some other films, mixtures of some other films. One similar in the sense of its court case, A Time to Kill, which is a John Grisham book about a black man in the South killing a white man, and how they use the race card, the race angle, as a way, like, if a white guy would have done this to a black man, would we be taking it as seriously as we are? If it was, you know what I mean? Like, and in this case, if it was a man instead of a woman that had done this, would we be taking it the same way? Would we be putting them on trial, to probably have a more extensive sentence in jail or like whatnot? Would we be taking it so seriously? And that's what she's trying to prove. That's why she's using the feminist angle, the equal angle to prove her case.
Yeah, she's basically trying to have this case be on an even playing field. Like, would this guy get off simply because he is a man versus a woman? Like, she's trying to level the bias, essentially.
And what's interesting about that is that maybe I missed it, but like, I feel like if that's something she was trying to prove, maybe they should have brought up like past cases where men have done things to women like that. Yeah, and talked about how the outcomes of them cases were. I don't remember that ever happening, so that was kind of like a little bit of a plot hole. But
yeah, a lot. Yeah, I mean, the movie is a Hollywood movie. It's not going to be 100% accurate to how a court case would be, which is not. It takes a lot of fantastical situations, like the situation we were just talking about, bringing in these women just to tell you just to prove that women are, superior to men in society in some ways. That had no real bearing on this particular case. You know what I mean? It really didn't have anything to do with that specific situation with the defendant, with the other person. And it's kind of interesting that the judge just kind of lets that go. But yet again, the movie is trying to delve into these themes, therefore is going to do that. You know what I mean? It's not like some other films that may have taken it a little more straight lined, courtroom drama esque. But what is happening? But moving from the courtroom back to the, I guess, the home, if you will, and the relationship between Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn's character is that as the trial goes on, their relationship gets more and more strained. Like initially, like we discussed about, they tried to keep it very separate. You know what I mean? We'd have a scene at the court, and then we have a scene at home, and they would be completely different. They're not attacking one another. They're not even talking about the case. But as the film goes on, the lines tend to blur, and the relationship becomes very, very strained because they are on the opposite sides of the issue, both I think personally as well as in the courtroom. And it's interesting how it's not so much that Spencer Tracy's character is like believes men are superior than women or misogyny and anything like that. He's trying to go by just the letter of the law. Like what this person did is illegal. Firing a gun at someone is illegal by the law.
He's doing what she wants. He's doing exactly what she's fighting for. He's looking at the case, blind of whether it's a man or woman. He's looking at the fact that it's somebody that committed a crime and needs to be persecuted for it.
Yeah.
And she's blinded by her agenda, which is not a bad agenda either.
No.
It's not a bad thing either. It's just maybe the wrong place to have that agenda.
No,
wrong time and place.
Yeah. I think the case itself doesn't quite lend to her particular agenda. I mean, it works in some ways where she's trying to show that women are treated badly by husbands and therefore they have a justifiable aggressive reaction. You know what I mean? Like their reaction, they have been wronged so much to the point where inevitably they would get to the point of violence. You know what I mean? I think that's what she's trying to prove. While Spencer Tracy is not taking that into regard, he's trying to just be as objective as possible.
Yeah, and the thing is if she wanted to me, the more realistic way to go about that would be if you were trying to say deplete insanity, that she was so pushed so far that she did something outside of herself. And that's what they should have pushed more, and not a female agenda thing. That's a little bit of that Hollywood stuff too, but
right. I mean, yeah, they could have pleaded insanity, and probably, and initially that is kind of the argument that she was almost making, showing how emotionally distraught the woman was. I keep calling her the defendant. She's not. I don't believe she's. She's
the
defendant, right?
She's the plaintiff, or the defendant. Yeah, she's the defendant.
Yeah, she's the defendant. He's the plaintiff. Yeah, because Spencer Tracy is the DA. He's prosecuting the woman. Yeah, okay. Yeah. There you go. I just want to get all my players right in the game.
Well, somebody's got to be more technical about this other than the movie, because as much as I love the movie, they're not very straight. They're not really big on the details of
I love how by the end of the court case, none of those proper terminologies are being used anymore.
No. Yeah, and just getting to it, because I mean we're basically there. She ends up winning the case. I mean,
spoiler. I'm if you've been watching all of these,
oh my god,
we spoiled the hell out of this movie and all the others. But yeah, she ends up winning the case, and that puts an even more strain on their marriage, because it almost, she pushed it so far just to be right that it kind of it separated them enough. You know what I mean? They lost each other. They lost the connection each other had within this case. You know what I mean? Because if you see the beginning of the movie, they're very well connected. You know what I mean? By the end of the movie, they're trying to reconnect with one another. And there's some other things other than the case that I think kind of strains them. Like, there's that neighbor character we just got to talk about because he's in the movie and he is just an ass. He is just
he's just
jerk.
annoying. He's so
He's
annoying.
just annoying. I mean, and he's like, and what is interesting about him is you probably know people like him. The smart alecky people always have a comment for everything.
And openly hit on your girlfriends right in front of you.
Yeah, they're passive aggressive. I mean, he's really just kind of throwing himself repeatedly at Katharine Hepburn's character, even with her husband in the room. Like there's that whole sequence with them watching that home video of them up at their, I believe their summer home or whatever, and he's just ripping every moment like it's nothing. and by the end of the movie, there's a great sequence where Spencer Tracy, trying to prove his final point about what is technically right by the law and what is not.
I love it.
Is the famous scene. It's probably the most iconic scene in this movie, and a lot of people know it. It's the scene where he has the licorice gun, which apparently looks extremely real. I don't even know if you can get licorice guns now or not. Probably not in our society. Who knows what you can and cannot get? But yeah, he walks in on them together. You know, I mean,
well, the guy gets her super drunk and then makes a move on her.
Yeah, makes a move on her. Katharine Hepburn's character doesn't reciprocate any of those feelings at all. You know what I mean? She's more concerned about waiting for a call from her husband, and he walks in with a licorice gun, points it at them, and starts threatening them, saying, don't move,
replaying the whole case that they were just involved in, basically.
Yeah, we're just basically replaying the beginning of the movie, the whole opening of the movie.
Except this time it's a man in the girl's place.
Yeah, it's a man in the woman's place, and they're kind of the figment of this affair, which they're not really happening, but just for symbolic reasons, that's what it represents. And basically, Katharine Hepburn's character says, you don't have the right to do this, and there it is. That was it.
That's all I wanted.
I was like, that's all I wanted to hear, was that you, deep down, you kind of understand what I was believing, that someone doesn't have the right to point a gun at someone else. You know what I mean? In a threat, and shoot them, basically. Yeah. And that's kind of what the whole case was trying to be about.
That was the thing he always wanted, was that she was always talking about equality with women and men, and he wanted her to at least say, I understand that what she did was not right.
Right.
She was so caught up in the equality part of it, and that it was a woman that was being put on trial, and not about the fact that she had done something wrong, whether or not it was a woman or a man. And that's what he wanted to prove to her and get it out of her. And when he finally did, it didn't. Of course, it didn't end up helping anything right away, though.
No, it didn't really help their relationship in that moment. If anything, it probably strained it even more. But there was a very short amount of time left in the film at that point, so they had to wrap up very quickly. And what we get is a scene at the lawyer's office where they're working on their taxes. I think they file separately or something like that because of their professions, where they're both lawyers in different fields, and they have to kind of divvy up the assets, if you will. You know what I mean? Who paid for what, who owns this, whatever. And it's a very emotional scene where it almost becomes secondary, like all of these things, like, oh, whoever bought this, whoever bought that, whose is whose, becomes secondary, because what matters is that they're together. You know what I mean? Like, they're better together than all this separate stuff.
Well, it's to me, I mean, of course, I love the themes of this movie with all the quality stuff. That's all great and stuff, but it also it plays with their personal relationship. It plays into that themes of not letting your work interfere with your home life, not letting that, and that's a lot of times that's something that's typical of a male character in a movie. And in this sense, we get the male and the female versions of that in this movie, where they very much got caught up in their work and forgot about what was more important, which was the fact that they got to come home to each other every day and and continue to love each other. And through this problem, they probably grew stronger. Even though they already respected each other before, now they like probably respect each other even more. They understand each other even more.
Yeah, I think they came out of this with a much different, not different, but not
richer understanding.
Yeah. And enriched understanding of each other and their bond with one another. That goes beyond like you were saying, beyond their jobs. Like, you know what I mean? Like, their jobs are one aspect of their lives, but there's so many more other things that they have built together, specifically when it comes to that home in the country with the dogs and it's, and all that. They built something beyond their careers.
Yeah, they want to respect each other not only for their stands in their jobs, but their ideals. That's the thing. They both had respect for each other. They both were like on an equal playing field in the sense they were both lawyers. But, one thing they obviously had to work through was some of their ideals and some of their, stances on certain beliefs and things like that. And by the end of the movie, they had a better understanding of them, things between each other, and they respected them things in each other now. And that made them even more, together.
Yeah, it made them, like we've said, we're kind of beating around it here, but that's kind of the way the film ends, where they are presumably. Which I love the
scene together, where he's like showing her that he can cry on demand if he wants to.
Yeah, we get to a scene after the doctor's all there, where he's like, the tears were real, but I could cry on demand, which is
which is what women do all the time, and that's what he's trying to say. Is because there was a point earlier in the movie where they were giving each other massages, and she gets upset when he slaps her in the butt really hard and says that was like intentionally harder on purpose, and she gets upset, and then he's like, oh God, I can't, women start crying, and then she like kicks him in the leg like she was pretending to cry the whole time, and he's like, guys can do that too.
Yeah, there's a role reversal, kind of in that sense, and there's a role reversal at the end of the movie where the man becomes emotionally vulnerable because of the situation, as opposed to the woman, which happens a lot in movies and in real life, etc., etc. This idea that women are more emotionally fragile than men and all this stuff that we hear all the time, but in this film, it flips it, which I thought was really, really nice towards the end of the movie.
Very progressive. It's a very
it's a very progressive film, and we have to come around to it. Why this film is on this list, why it is essential, if you will, is because, like we've been able to discuss this whole time, there's a lot to glean from this movie. A lot of contemporary stuff that we've touched upon, and it's also a great film just in general. It's a smart, swift script. It's fantastically well acted, and there's a reason why people are still watching it today, and it's the reason why this is on the list. Like we said, there's so many Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn films you could put on this one. You know what I mean? You could have put A Woman of the Year or something like that, but they chose this one to put on the list, and I think it's a great one.
I can't agree more. Yeah, I can't agree more. I mean, I haven't seen all them other other movies that they've done, but I love this movie. This was a great film, and it's one that, there's been a lot of movies in this book that I haven't seen, and I'm seeing them for the first time, and this might be the best one I've seen that is a new one to me. That I completely agree that it should be in this book, because I think it's an essential film, because it has a lot to say, and I like movies that have a lot to say. And when they don't, I mean, I like them. I can still like them, but these speak to me more. And I'm glad it's in the book.
Yeah, and it's not something that I think a lot of people are aware of, like this movie in general. Also, the title of the movie is kind of odd. Adam's Rib. You hear that, and you're not quite sure what the movie is about. It's not really self-explanatory, but it is another connection. Adam apostrophe S rib, meaning going back biblically that a woman was created from the rib of Adam and all that stuff. So women and men are forever tied together in that respect. If you believe that specific story. You
That
know what I
and
mean?
that and isn't the main character's name Adam?
And coincidentally, the main character's name is Adam as well, which
And
is
is her name Eve?
I don't know. Her name is Amanda.
Amanda.
Remember,
So no,
remember that
yeah.
guy wrote that song about her, Amanda.
And,
Amanda.
oh god.
Like, dude.
And then of course he's singing at the end of the movie as a way of almost kind of being funny, I think.
Yeah,
But,
he sings it, and like I think at one point, like they bump into like a record player and it starts playing
oh no,
randomly.
yeah. When he leaves after fighting with her, she's like, "Don't you slam that door!" And then like he slams the door and it knocks over a couple things and then lands on the record player and starts playing that song.
Yeah,
and it's like don't leave, Amanda. You know?
Really self-explanatory.
Yeah.
I mean, and yet again, that's how the comedy plays in. But yeah, that's Adam's Rib, directed by George Cukor, who, if you're not familiar with George Cukor, is a very well-known director. He directed films like My Fair Lady and The Philadelphia Story, as well as A Star Is Born.
Which the Philadelphia Story is coming out on Criterion next week.
This coming week, whenever this.
Yeah, maybe we are going to be getting Adam's Rib soon. Yeah,
we're shooting this before the 7th of November. So whenever this comes out, it'll be out on the 7th of November for those of you who are collectors of classic movies. I'm surprised the Philadelphia Story isn't on the list. I don't believe it is.
No, it's not. It's not.
Which is surprising to me because that movie is so star-studded. We're talking about Cary Grant, Jimmy Stewart, and Katharine Hepburn. I mean, it's kind of the all-stars of the 1940s. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that would have been a great movie to discuss, but we won't be discussing that one.
No, not today.
But yet again, this has been Adam's Rib. And Steven, where can people find you online?
You can find me on Facebook, YouTube, Film Club Central. You can find me Instagram, Twitter, Stardust, Movie Man 16 or Movie Man for Life. Look for me.
Look for him everywhere and everywhere. You can find me on Twitter at Capzilla06, as well as my YouTube channel, Capzilla Productions. And you can find all of the other videos in this series here on Dan Skip Allen's YouTube channel, Best Damn Movie Show. And we will eventually, like I say in every video, get to that magic number 52 at some point. 52 is where we're heading, and hopefully we get there before the end of the world.
We're almost there, man. We got I think at this moment we got about 18 or 19 more movies.
Yeah, so there are a lot of movies, and what's coincidental is you could do a top 100 essential list, and you'd still have so many more movies that you'd be leaving off. But yeah, if you guys been liking what we've been doing, go back and check out all the ones we've already done, and then check out all the ones we will be doing. So until next time, keep watching those movies.